Hello everyone, thank you for joining Kyriba Global Summit 2020. This session is Centralizing Payments and Fraud Management with Kyriba. My name is Camille Meunier from the product team here at Kyriba. This is a 30-minute listen-only session. Please submit any question to us via the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. If we run out of time before we can answer all your questions, we'll be sure to follow up via email later this week. It's my pleasure to introduce today's featured presenter, Jennifer Tomaloff from Trek Bicycles. Jennifer is an international treasury manager at Trek Bicycle Corporation with over 10 years of extensive experience in both domestic and international cash management, banking, and liquidity management. She has assisted with the successful implementation of several treasury management systems over her career and has been leading the treasury transformation at Trek. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jenny.
Thank you, Camille. I'd like to start by talking a little bit about Trek Bicycle Corporation. Trek Bicycle was born in a barn founded in 1976 in Waterloo, Wisconsin. On the screen, you should see a photo of this original barn that Trek was founded in. It still exists today, just a few blocks away from our corporate headquarters, which is the photo in the lower part of your screen. Trek Bicycle is a leader in the bicycle industry with over 3,500 employees across 26 countries. Trek sells bicycle and bicycle accessories in over 100 countries through a global network of 5,000 independent bike dealers and distributors. Today, I would like to talk about how when Trek started their implementation of the Kyriba system, we followed the process that most companies do, where we start by implementing cash management and cash forecasting as the first set of modules. We were partway through implementing this in the cash forecasting module when Trek started to see a significant increase in the amount of phishing attacks against the company. And some of these phishing attacks were so sophisticated and so good that we knew we had to do something right away to act to protect our company from these type of phishing acts and having a potential for fraud activity to happen. So what we did is we decided to put together a plan, and executive management was supporting us 100% of the way. The plan was to strengthen and standardize our global payment process to be much more resilient to fraud. We wanted to simplify our global banking structure and standardize processes. We also wanted to reduce the number of banking partners that we had. We needed to leverage technology, such as Kyriba, to reduce manual processes and create time for more value-added work. Our executive team fully supported us and gave us the message that no payment is a rush. No executive will ever instruct you to make a payment by email, and no payment should ever bypass controls. So when we started, our global payment process had weaknesses that made us much more vulnerable to fraud. One of them was we had 27 different bank portals. And in these 27 bank portals, we had 60 different users that had the ability to release payments. Some controls could be bypassed. Just through the inconsistency of processes that we had. And in these inconsistencies of process, we had one ERP system globally, but we had a significant difference in the processes that payments were done. Some payments were automated where you ran a job in our ERP system and it picked up all the payments that were due for that week, and it actually generated a file that you could download and then import into the bank portal. Other subsidiaries had a 100% manual process. We had one subsidiary that said it took them about 8 hours to do a payment process, which was pretty interesting to learn. So as I mentioned, you could download these payment files from the ERP for the countries that did have an automated process or a semi-automated process, but these files weren't secure. So they were downloading them. They had the ability to be edited or modified at that time before they were uploaded to the bank portal. We also had local bank user setup weaknesses. So what we decided is we wanted upfront payment controls in the ERP system, which we have a single source of globally. And we wanted the payment file to be generated after these initial payment and vendor controls were validated. From there, we wanted the payment file to go into Kyriba and be run through their fraud module. and then another final payment review and approval process before the payment file was actually sent to the bank. So this is what we did. Vendor adder changes are reviewed prior to the payment run as part of the vendor controls. So this became a consistent process globally. The ERP payment run is generated, and a file is actually reviewed and approved within the ERP system as just a first step approval process. After this approval, another job is run in the ERP system that pushes the payment file to an SFTP folder, which Kyriba picks up. And then from there, Kyriba creates the payment file that'll ultimately go to the bank with the vendor bank information. And every one of these payments is scanned by the fraud rules within Kyriba. And then we have the final payment release that I mentioned before that releases the payments from Kyriba directly out to the bank. So about 1% to 2% of our payments aren't processed through Kyriba today. These are payments that our global banks can't do with a payment file. So for example, like certain tax payments, in some countries it might be a payroll payment. So what we did with these is we identified these individual payment types. These payment types going outside of Kyriba had to be approved by the treasurer and the CFO to say, like, look, we have this tax payment in China. It's not able to be sent through as a file with our bank. So we're going to let them process this through the bank portal. From there, we would try to lock down the bank portal as much as possible to prevent non-authorized payments. And what I mean by this is we would go in there, and you can usually select in a bank portal if somebody has access to priority payments or domestic payments or tax payments or payroll payments. And so we wouldn't allow somebody who only needed to make tax payments through the portal to make priority payments or domestic payments. We'd only give them that individual access. And then Treasury tried to gain admin access wherever possible to these local bank portals to run administration and also assist with any issues. Kyriba accounts for 99% of our payment value, which is awesome because all of these are scanned by the fraud detection module. We have dual payment authorization. We utilize single sign-on, and Treasury administrates all of the users for Kyriba. So the key changes that we had from beginning state to end state is we used to have payments from the 27 different bank portals. Now we have payments from 3 primary banks, all running through Kyriba. Freeform payments used to be allowed in the bank portals. And what that was is when you just go in the bank portal and you hit create and you put in the beneficiary information, the amount you want to send, and you hit submit. Now, if for some reason we can't process the payment through, we have restricted templates that are used in the bank portal. And a restricted template can actually be set up and entered by Treasury and approved. And then when the user goes to make that payment, they have to use the restricted template. They can't just put in any bank account information or modify the bank account information. As I mentioned before, we used to have more than 60 individuals that could release payments in the 27 bank portals that we had, and now we're down to 10 individuals that can release payments in Kyriba. These same 10 individuals are the individuals releasing the payments in our bank portal as well. We weren't sure we could get there, and we did, and that is great. In the past, a lot of subsidiaries would use high priority wire payments just as a standard payment method. We made it a goal to try to send all payments as low value domestic payment unless it's required to be high value, for example, if it's a cross-border payment. As I mentioned before, we used to have where the ERP system would generate the file and it had the potential to be edited after generation before it was imported in the bank portal. That is no longer an issue. It goes straight from the ERP to a secure server to Kyriba, and then from Kyriba to a secure server to the bank. We had inconsistent payment processes and vendor setup change processes. There, in some cases, were no review and approval, or there was minimal review and approval. Now we have a global one set standard payment process and vendor setup process and change process with review and approval. We didn't have fraud review. We didn't have the Kyriba fraud module, and now we do. And a little bit about the Kyriba fraud module. Some of the detection rules that it has a blacklist, which will stop payments going to any blacklisted country. It also has a whitelist, which stops any payment to a vendor located outside of a pre-approved list of countries. So for example, in Australia, we have a whitelist set up, and Australia generally pays, most of its vendors are in Australia. So on their whitelist, we have Australia, they also pay the US, and they pay the Netherlands. So those are the three countries that we have on our whitelist for Australia. Australia had recently a payment that went to Taiwan. It was caught by our fraud module, and then we had a discussion about it. It was a valid payment, everything was fine. But then the question came up, do we add Taiwan to their whitelist? And the local team decided they didn't want to add Taiwan to the whitelist. They would rather, since it's only 1 or 2 payments a year, leave Taiwan on there and know that this one might trigger the fraud alert as it comes through. So that made us feel like really comfortable. It gave all of us a really good, sense of security. Another detection rule that Kyriba has is first payment. It'll stop the first payment in Kyriba for any vendor that's new or has updated banking information. High value wire payments, you can stop and hold wire payments over a certain amount. Payment patterns, it can stop or flag payments where the amount or frequency to a vendor does not match its history. And payment changes. This is where you import the payment file, or I should say you don't import it. It automatically imports into Kyriba, but somebody tries to change the payment in Kyriba before it is approved and released out to the bank. If somebody does that, goes in, maybe tries to change a value date or change an amount, it will get caught in the fraud filter and it will need an additional review and approval before it can go out. So that is basically what we did. We felt really good about all of the changes we have made. It has given us a great sense of security. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Back to you, Camille.
Thank you for this very instructive session. We are now going to answer the different questions we have received in the Q&A box. So the first question will be, what were the biggest challenges you faced in this implementation, and what advice would you give someone looking to implement payment and fraud modules?
Sure. So we had I would say two big challenges. One of them is something that just happens that you can never expect. Our lead IT manager, who was part of the project, he was our project manager for the whole entire Kyriba implementation. He gave his notice and decided to go work for another company right before we started to kick off payments. And so that kind of gave us a little bit of a setback, which I think is normal. Anytime you're implementing something big, things like this come up and delay your project. So that was one. The other one is when working with, a variety of different banks to get them to, run a process differently. The banks always have certain documentation. Sometimes the documentation's a little bit complex. Getting, the documentation completed, signed by the appropriate people, back to the bank, then the bank to resolve, it can be a little bit time consuming. So what I would say is always bake in some extra time for the unexpected, and then always bank in some time for the documentation side of things that you don't think of or you don't think would take as long as they do to get them done and have a bank actually review them.
Okay, clear. Another question, did you receive any pushback from your international subsidiaries? And if so, how did you handle it?
Sure. So usually when implementing a new system and new process, you always get some kind of pushback, and we did. But it wasn't that terrible. The best part was having the executive management team supporting the project and the process. The other part was having our security team that helped to make people aware of the phishing attacks and the increase of phishing attacks and how vulnerable, we could potentially be. When we started rolling out the payment modules and working with each of the individual, controllers in the countries, it almost like benefited overall, because what it did is it gave this real heightened awareness to fraud. just by reviewing the payment processes and making the change, talking about the fraud module and how it works, I think it just heightened everybody who did anything in AP or anything with payments at all. It heightened their awareness to, oh, we're making these drastic changes because there is this high risk. So I think that worked out, really well in the end.
Perfect. Well, good news. Another question. Where are you in your project, and what are the next steps in front of you?
So our project is mostly complete. We have all of our countries and subsidiaries on this process and running payments through Kyriba. The next steps that we are taking really has a lot to do with if we go into business in a new country, then we have to kind of, kick off payments in that country and run through that and getting the fraud module set up for that. So that is where we are and what our next steps will be.
Okay, clear. So the next question is more related to the Kyriba product, so I can take it. Do you use artificial intelligence and machine learning in the fraud module? So yes, we do. So just to clarify, machine learning is a specific type of algorithm that can learn from past data and make a prediction on a new data. So in Kyriba's context, for the fraud module, it was really relevant to apply this technology. So with machine learning, what we can do, the machine learning algorithm can learn trends and common behaviors from historical payments. And then when you create or do a new payment, it's possible for the machine learning model can automatically detect if this payment is an anomaly or not. And if it's an anomaly, then you can receive an alert as for any rule in the fraud module. And what we the key advantage of our fraud module is really the combination of all the rules that you can customize to fit your needs, and the power of machine learning, which is a really powerful new technology. So this is for this more product-related question. And there is a last question for you, Jen. So with the fraud module, were you able to stop fraud before it occurred?
We've never really had a fraud incident fully happen that's gone all the way through. I think we acted in time when fraud took off. It's interesting now to see, especially since COVID hit, how much fraud has actually increased even more. And so we're set up in a good position to not have to be as concerned about it. We are always aware. Our security team is always sending out reminders and training to keep us hyper aware of, the attacks against us, the attacks against any company, I guess. So we're feeling pretty good. We are definitely interested in the machine learning that you just mentioned. And we're looking forward to learning more about that with you.
Perfect. So thank you. It looks like we are nearing the end of our time for this session. So if you have any outstanding questions, please send those to activeliquidity@kyriba.com. So a big thank you to Jennifer Tomalov from Trek Bicycle for her time and contribution to today's session. There is another Kyriba Global Summit session starting now, so make sure to find your way back to the agenda page and join us for the next session.